Hi, I'm Julie Truthsayer. This is God's holy truth that we find written in all the sacred texts of all the major religions around the world that worship that one true God, the eternal yet ever-present source of all light, the light of unconditional love, of humility, the peace that passes understanding, healing, abundance, truth, discipline, strength, courage, freedom, all of God's holy light rays, including a happiness that wells up from deep inside of us and pours forth to bless and uplift all spirits around us. That light, that love, that joy, that happiness, that God. In our Constitution of the United States of America, we are guaranteed the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when you look around society today, you see everybody's running around trying to get happy. What's going to make me happy? Is it this car? Is it that drug? Is it this alcohol? Is it that flat screen TV? Is it this truck? Is it this food? Is it this partner? Is it this position? Is it that much money? What's going to make me happy? Well, people first came to this country, even before this was a country, because we have the freedom here to worship that one true God we've been talking about with absolute freedom in whatever way we want to worship God. And so all kinds of Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, Taoists, Zoroastrians came to this country because they could worship that one true God and bring forth the light in the way that they wanted to. And so we all were bringing forth God's light, and we became known as that shining city on the hill in this country and around the world. Well, in today's society, people are worshiping the false gods of the human mind, the human desires, the human body, and we're bringing forth a lot of darkness. And when you look around in society, you see I'm telling the truth. So much darkness, ugliness, hatred, violence, and because we've strayed away, people are no longer going to their sacred buildings to worship. They're worshiping these false gods. What are the false gods anyway? They are the 7 deadly sins. Here they are again. And when you look around society, you'll see I'm telling the truth. Pride, greed, anger, envy, gluttony, sloth, lust. Yes, that's what's being worshipped in our society today to the max, and not that one true God of the Holy Spirit. So what can we do to raise this light in our country and within ourselves again? Well, let's take a look at each of these deadly sins, and they're deadly because they're deadly to the Spirit of God within us. We worship them, we don't worship the light. So, and they give us a taste of the light. They give us this little bit of heaven, and then boom, they leave us flat. So let's take each one and see how can we bring that light instead of the sin. The first deadly sin is that false egotistical pride that a lot of people have, especially politicians who think they're all that, and they have they worship the human mind and the human ego. So if you try to criticize the man, immediately you're bombarded with all these epitaphs and name calling, because they feel personally threatened, because that's how they identify themselves, that human characteristics, you know. And yet we who worship the one true God, we know that God is perfect, and we are not, and we can bring forth that light of God within us of perfection, but we don't have to be perfect right now. So if somebody criticizes us, we say, oh, maybe you're right, let's take a look at it. And if we see that, yeah, it's something we need to work on, then we say, thank you for pointing that out to us. And we start working on it, ask God for help, because then we have the opportunity to become even more one with God's light. So that's the difference. And Jesus saw these same characteristics in the Pharisees in the Bible. He called them the stiff-necked generation. They were the it group in the Bible. Baby, if you were a Pharisee, you were in. They had all these thousands of rules and regulations, though, that were empty and devoid of the Spirit of God, but you had to follow them, or else you were out. Now, it's a lot like the it groups today and these PC rules that we're supposed to follow. Jesus said, "One commandment I give unto thee, that you love one another as I have loved thee." If we are filled to the brim with that light of love, we will naturally want to respect and rejoice in every being that we encounter and be one in brotherhood, peace, love, and joy, and sisterhood. So that's the difference, the ego and God's light within us. The second deadly sin is anger. There's so many people running around. The second deadly sin is actually greed. This is the big one, ladies and gentlemen. People bend the knee, bow the head, prostrate themselves at the feet of the almighty dollar. And yet, millionaires and billionaires, unfortunately and tragically, kill themselves. They have full pockets and empty souls and empty spirits. That's what happens. Now, there's also yogis sitting on a mountaintop. They just have a loincloth and a couple of sunflower seeds, and they are in ecstasy, 24/7 ecstasy, light just pouring from every atom, cell, and electron of their entire consciousness, being, and world. And they know the source of all true eternal happiness, and that's worshiping the eternal God of light. So, the third deadly sin then is anger. And anger is so prevalent in some groups in society today, in the United States and in other countries, worshiping that anger, anger, anger. You know what God teaches? Forgiveness. Buddha says anger is like holding a hot coal in your hand that you're going to throw at somebody. You're the one getting burned. It strips the soul and spirit of a person and squishes it. What we want is that freedom of forgiveness, the light of forgiveness blazing forth inside of us. And sure, the United States of America has caused a lot of heartache and horror in our past, and yet we've got to get over that. We've got to be forgiving, loving, understanding, and in peace, love, brotherhood, and oneness, and get past that and be one in that joy of the Spirit of God. The fourth deadly sin is envy. There's politicians telling us today to envy other people for their money and their material stuff. We know what material stuff does. Nothing in terms of really fulfilling us eternally, right? And so why envy other people that have more stuff? Where does it get you? It says in the Bible, it says, lay not your riches up on earth where worms and rust can devour them. You want to lay your riches up in heaven with love and good works, so that you are truly rewarded in eternal light. And it also says in the Bible that a rich man will have a harder time getting to heaven than a camel will have getting through the eye of a needle. So we might decide there that it's probably not real conducive to heavenly pursuits to try and get rich with earthly riches. So that's the teaching with envy, and it also says be happy for other people's good fortune, because they've earned it. And this is the truth. People have earned their money that are rich. They have worked hard for it. They have been disciplined. They have gone to school, got their degrees, or worked hard in their different fields to really master them. They deserve that money. It is not true that people have stepped on other people to get ahead. I mean, there are cases, of course. They get found out and they get their karma. It's up to God to judge, not us. So be happy for other people and work hard on your divine plan, your mission that God has put in your heart to achieve in this lifetime, so that you may receive the abundance from God also. The fifth deadly sin is gluttony. Now, this is another big one in the United States of America. We are blessed here with lots of food and lots of good tasting food. And it does taste good and it does feel good. But once all those calories are burned that we need, the rest of the food that we've eaten goes to fat. And then we don't have any more calories that we're burning, and then we have a lot of fat to carry around with us. So it's a false god. It doesn't give us the lasting joy that we're seeking in feeding our spirits with God's light. So the teaching in this is to only eat enough food so that you can keep your body alive and going, so that you can fulfill your divine mission for God, and keep going. There's Unitarians here that have not eaten for 15 or 20 years any food, and yet they're alive. They've been tested and studied by the University of Pennsylvania for a whole year. They were looked at, and 24/7. They never ate. So you don't need to eat. However, you don't want to be an Unitarian unless you really have mastered that. So, but just only eat enough to keep your body going so that you can fulfill that mission for God in this lifetime. That's the real reward. The sixth deadly sin is sloth. So many people in the United States of America want stuff, they don't want to work for it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we also have a teaching on that. Jesus tells a parable of the master and the talents. The master is always God in his parables, and the servants are always us. So in this parable, the master calls the servants in and says he's going away for a while, and he gives them money. Then he comes back and he calls them in again, and the first servant comes in and says, Master, I doubled the money you gave me. And God says, wow, thou good and faithful servant, here's some more. And then the second servant comes in and says, Master, I doubled the money you gave me. And the master, God, says, thou good and faithful servant, here's some more. And then the third servant comes in and says, Master, I know you're an angry and jealous taskmaster, so I hid the money and I sat around and I did nothing. And God goes, thou slothful and unfaithful servant, I'm taking away the money I gave you and you're not getting any more. So God does not reward sloth, even though our federal government does. We want to please God. We want to be filled with God's light and spirit. So we want to work hard to earn our money and fulfill our plan for God. The seventh deadly sin is lust. There are so many people here in the United States of America that want us to pay for their birth control because they're having so much sex. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is lust. Unfortunately, babies are born from lust and nobody wants them. They are abused and neglected, and sometimes not even born. They are aborted, and this is the killing and abuse and neglect of little babies of God's holy light that want to be born and want to thrive and want to fulfill their divine plan, and we are cutting that off because of lust. The real teaching is that we want to have the union of a man and a woman in the holy light of God's matrimony, in God's light, and produce babies, because a man and a woman fit together perfectly, and to create babies of God's holy light, and they're raised up in the sanctity and union of God, in the teachings of God, to do God's will and to bring forth more light. And then they'll have babies in the sanctity of marriage, to produce more of God's holy light, and pretty soon we have all kinds of people being created and raised up in God's light and producing God's light. This will once again bring us to that shining city on the hill, and if everybody in the world does it, we'll have a whole Garden of Eden again back here on earth. And that's what our souls are really looking for. We're missing that light 24/7 that we had in oneness with God in the Garden of Eden, and we remember it, and we fell from that because we did our will instead of God's will. If we get back to only doing God's will, we will be evoking and invoking so much light that pretty soon we will be one with all God's light again in the Garden of Eden, and we will be so blessed. So God bless you on your journey of light, and God bless us, everyone. Thank you so much.